Hey guys, how you doing today? It's Jenaya Huxter here. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm a self-empowerment speaker, educator and advocate from here in South Australia. I also help people with their online businesses and I'm an online entrepreneur, so it's cool. And today I'm going to be joined by a good friend of mine called Dean Powell, who is a facilitator of change. He takes people through what we call a quantum shift process to get rid of years of trauma in just one session. So any moment, Dean will be jumping on. I'm just going to give that a moment to see, to see him pop up on the screen. There he is. So it's really interesting. I had been following Dean for a while. He didn't really know I was following him, I don't think, until very, very recently. Hey!
Hello.
How you doing?
Yeah, really good. Happy Wednesday.
Yes, happy Wednesday. How's the weather over there in Bali?
It's actually quite warm. It's a bit cloudy today, not as sunny as it was yesterday, but it's still fine, yeah.
Awesome.
A lot of rain at the moment, sometimes in the afternoon, but Bali's great like that. Like it can be really sunny, beautiful, sunbaker weather in the morning and then bucket down with rain in the afternoon. So you
At
can
least it's
plan
not
around it.
cold rain though.
Yeah. You can still go out in a singlet and shorts and get wet and it's still beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I know,
Yeah.
I've only been to Bali once and it was one of those places I didn't actually think I was going to like it. And then when I went there, I'm like, I love this place.
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree. I was exactly the same. Like, and the people are amazing, and the place has got a beautiful magic feel all of its own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just can't, I absolutely can't wait to get back there. But anyway, we'll get into today's call. So, Dean and I have both lived very different lives, but I would say on two different sides of addiction. So we've both had some incredible experiences which have really helped us become the people we are today and really help us be able to bring that as a place of value and content and in a way that we can actually help people, which is really cool. So we're going to go into that today and share with you like our specific stories and like how that has looked and how we can possibly help and support people. So it's really, really cool. But I was just mentioning before you jumped on, Dean, that I had been following you for a while, and I don't think you knew this. Like you only knew recently because I tagged you in something, but I've been following you for a while. And long story short, like I've lived my whole life pretty much like on the other side of addiction. I've been addicted to my phone and chocolate, but I haven't had like a typical addiction, right? But I've been surrounded by people that did my entire life. I knew it wasn't something that I wanted, but like I didn't really know how to get rid of it either, like because these are people that I love. So it was really, really tough. And when I first saw you on Facebook, I was at a time in my life where I'm shaking. Like I just knew that I couldn't handle it anymore. Like I'd gotten to that point, like it had been so long, and then I'd been in this relationship, and I was probably like, 9 or 10 years into this relationship, nothing was changing, nothing we were doing or saying or talking about seemed to make a difference. And I was just at a point where I was just feeling so broken and so like, oh, like how, like what can I do? Like where can I go with this? Like something needs to change, but I love this person. How do I deal with it? And when I first saw, I think you were talking about your quantum shift process and like supporting people through addiction and you were sharing your story. And I was like, I just wish that this person was watching this. Like, I wish that this person and all these different people who are affected by addiction were actually like looking at this guy. I wish they were looking at it, like paying attention and going, wow, like I can change if I want to. Wow, I could help people if I want to. Like, wow, like I have opportunities and I have choices and I have decisions that I can make. And I was just in a very sort of broken space where I was totally just like I was breaking down internally, closing off all different facets of me because I was just trying to deal with this situation. And when I saw your stuff, I was like, I just wish people would see this, and I just wish people would like look at it and go, like, I can connect with this, and like there is support, like there is stuff that can be done.
Yeah, actually, you said something really powerful there when you were sharing about, you've had a life kind of like where you've had addiction around you all the time and it wasn't something that you wanted, but it just seemed to happen. And I think that's a really important point to remember, even with people who are struggling with the addiction themselves. It's not something that they necessarily want. It's not something they choose. Like I didn't choose to become an addict. I didn't, it wasn't the life that I thought I was going to have and that it wasn't on my goal list. It's something that kind of happens and then takes over. And as much as you don't want it, not being able to stop it is just as frustrating and just as like demeaning and everything else, you know. So yeah, amazing point there.
It's like you get into that cycle, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, and then it gets more and more control. You get less and less control, so then you feel more helpless, more powerless. So you need that even more, and it's a dangerous.
Yeah,
problem.
and the ability to be able to see that disappears.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no matter how many times people around you try and tell you, and then the more they try and tell you, the more broken you feel, the worse
and then
you
you try and
feel.
rebel. Like, I don't want to listen. Like, I'm going to
Yeah,
rebel against whatever you're saying. And like, you try and like, as someone who's been on the other side of that, you can try in so many different ways, like to try and express or to try and like get through to somebody. But like, I was just sitting there going, I wish they would see something like this and see what I see. Like, I just wish they could see it for themselves. Like, they could come across this sort of thing. They could see it for themselves. Like, they didn't have to be tagged in it or anything like that, but they
yeah,
could see it for themselves and be like, okay. So we actually met sort of like online, because I
sort
did
of.
a post sharing my, yeah, we met like this.
Yeah,
I did a post sharing my story on the other side of addiction and like what my life has been up to this point. And then a couple of days later, like, I'd had all these people reach out to me, both who had had similar experiences or who were just inspired, or even people who were addicts themselves. And, you know, maybe they're ready to make a move. Maybe they're still stuck in that cycle and they don't want to break out of it yet. But I thought, well, like, I've done this post. There's 150 people have like engaged on it. So like, let's give them some type of resource. So I tagged Dean and a couple of other people in a post and said, you know, hey guys, if anyone is struggling with addiction, or like you know people with addiction and you're struggling with that yourself, then there are places to go for support. And I tagged you in that post, and we sort of got talking from there.
yeah. Well done. I'm glad you did. I
Yeah.
just want to give a quick shout out to everybody who's jumping on too. And I just noticed my brother from New Zealand has jumped on. Hi, Kevin. Nice to have you on board, buddy. And everybody else who's joining in. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, guys. I'm noticing all these
Yeah.
new faces, like, and
Mm.
not new faces, but like people I haven't seen in like 10 years. So hey, Todd.
Yeah, nice, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really cool. But yeah, I feel like we should just share our stories and like
Yeah,
where we've been in our life with addiction, how maybe we've learned from it, the lessons, and we can sort of go from there. So how about you share
absolutely.
first?
Why not? So, look, I mean, where do you start? I was reflecting on this beforehand. I've actually written a book, like, so it's an in-depth, you know, story
Yeah.
about my life and how it all kind of happened, how I got there, how I turned it around. But I guess the short view is, oh, the short story is, you know, growing up as a child, never feeling like I belonged or never feeling wanted. And I mean, mostly from my dad, never feeling like I was loved by my dad. You know, I had lots of love around me from my mum, like my siblings, you know, I know they loved me. There was my mum was nurturing, loving, you know, very demonstrative mum. But my dad was pretty violent and angry and abusive at times. And although I know he loved us, you know, like he just didn't know how to show it. He had, you know, a very short temper, would fly off the handle at the drop of a hat. And so I think that kind of started to program in my mind this thought that my dad doesn't love me. And a lot of different circumstances happened. And I guess the very earliest one I remember actually is when I remember being a little kid and I ran into the lounge to give my dad a hug and a kiss goodnight. And my twin sister had raced in there and beaten me to it. So she was giving him a hug in the lounge, you know, like, and I remember running in there. And before I got there, he jumped out of his chair and he went, whoa, 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 whoa. And he stopped me and he went, this is what real men do. And he held his hand out to shake my hand, and he said, and I was like, I want a hug and a kiss. Leanne got one, I want a hug and a kiss. And he was like, no, 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 this is what men do. And he shook my hand. And he
And how
said,
old were you?
that's what I was just going to say. He said, you're getting too old for this shit now. And I was 6 years of age.
Oh,
And I remember thinking, oh, you know, like in that moment thinking, wow, my dad doesn't love me as much as my sister, you know. And I don't know to this day I mean, back then homophobia was pretty big, and, you know, like I
yeah.
guess people were talking, and guys at work would have told them, if you mollycoddle your kids, they'll grow up to be, you know, to be weak and to be pussies and to be gay, I guess. And that was a big fear back then. So,
Yeah, and
but I just remember,
looking back, like he was probably just trying to teach you something,
oh, and
but
trying to
it
protect
definitely
me in his way, yeah.
doesn't feel that way as a child.
No, no, no. So I made the story about, you know, okay, my dad doesn't love me. My dad doesn't think I'm good enough. And then from there, all these other things that happened, him being angry, abusive, you know, like, and then that just confirmed in my mind, yeah, he doesn't love me. I'm not good enough. And so I tried to be better. I tried to be good for him. I became a real people pleaser. You know, I learned how to be really funny. I became the real funny kid, you know, like, and it would break the ice a lot of the time. and then he'd forget about why he was so angry. But it all became this coping behavior that wasn't me, so I never ever felt safe inside. You know, I never felt like I could just be me and be loved and be liked for who I was or for who I am. So then I started to kind of look for that outside of myself. You know, I started to follow, especially male role models, or, you know, the alpha male. I'd hang out with, you know, try to fit in with the cool kids and kind of do what they were doing, but I never did. You know, like they used to just beat me up, and I was bullied all that, you know, a lot of, and again, there's a perception that I was really weak. You know, my dad was the tough, strong one. I didn't have any strength, and you know, I was pretty weak as a kid, and so I didn't really fight back because I never thought I could.
Yeah.
So I grew up with this perception of not being lovable, being weak, being, you know, not as good as everybody else, and definitely not as strong and as powerful as any other male, you know. So I started to follow these men and look to them for, you know, for approval. And then it got to a point, I guess, in my life when I travelled around the world. I ended up in Australia, and then I started to hang around with bikies because they were the alpha male, you know, and some of these tough guys. And then I started, you know, I started to go to these parties and got involved with drugs and started to deal. And then I started to use what I was supplying, and then I started to get really hooked on the drugs, you know. And also because the drug kind of gave me something, you know, like it made me, I was the life of the party, you know, like I was like, suddenly I had, my confidence went to 11 instead of 3, 11 out of 10.
It made you feel good.
Oh my God, I thought, you know, like, and that's what I thought, wow, this is just amazing, you know, like I found the answer.
Yeah.
And I'd go to parties and I was the life of the party and everyone loved me. But the truth is, the more, you know, like, so every time I needed confidence after that, then I'd need to turn to this drug, because in my perception, I had no confidence, but this gave me confidence, which is, I mean, 1 + 1 = 2, makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
But it got to a point where I started to use it every time I needed confidence. So like I needed, or if I had a job interview to go to, or, you know, like if I was talking to a group of people, or, you know, going to a party and I didn't know anyone there, then I'd need to have this in my system. And then it just got to the point where, you know, I couldn't even go outside. I couldn't face the day. I couldn't face anybody coming over unless I had it in my system, because I had no confidence. So the more confidence I gave this drug, the less confidence I had, until it got to a point where I had 0. And then I was completely dependent on this drug. And then I did anything I could to get this into my system, you know, especially when I started shooting up. And I vowed I would never, ever shoot up. I would never use needles. I was scared of needles. I hated needles.
Yeah.
Snorting was the only way I was ever going to do it. And then, yeah, I met a girl once who kind of was into needles. And then she kind of convinced me, and oh, go and have a go. It's nothing too bad. And then from that moment, I chased that high, like, because it was a different way of having it. And it was that whole, the rush you get from that.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous rush, because you spend the rest of your life chasing that rush, and not necessarily just from the drug, but they say the feel of the steel, you know, that feel of that steel in your arm,
even without that, when you look around at people with different types of addictions, it doesn't matter whether it's heroin or weed or alcohol. They still have, whether it's confidence or another thing, they're still feeling that void and feeling those same feelings. And then whether it's a needle or a bong, like, it still has that rush, and it's that habit that gets attached to it. And sometimes it's this that they need, like putting a cigarette to your mouth. Sometimes it's that action rather than the actual drug itself. And then
you get addicted to the ritual.
Crossed.
Yeah, they say you get addicted to that ritual. So even now, I mean, if I go to to get a blood test or something, as soon as that nurse starts flicking that needle, like, something like happens in my body where it's almost like, oh, give me that. I want to do it myself, you know, like it's my body memory. And it's like that ritual we get addicted to. And you're right. Like, you can, like, I remember even when I was going to score drugs, when I'd run out, and when I was on my way to go and get them, I could feel everything happening in my body. Like, I was revving, I was speeding, I was having all the effects of the drug before I even had it in my body.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the same thing. And the same with, like you say, it's the ritual of, you know, having, most people say when they give up smoking, I don't know what to do with my hands. You know, like, I need something in my hands now because I don't know what to do with my hands. So you're right, yeah. So it's that ritual. And look, I mean, I started really late in my life. So it was like I was in my 30s when I started to do all of this. So, you know, I was brought up religious, very religious. So I kind of didn't get into anything. I was a good boy and wanted to be a good boy, and up until I left church at about 19 years of age. And then I started to dabble. But and at this stage, when I started to use, I mean, I met a girl and got involved with her and had a relationship. She had no idea what I was doing, so I was hiding all of this from her. She had no idea I was using drugs. Well, she had no idea that I was dealing drugs. She had no idea that I was using, and definitely not the amount that I was using and the way I was using it.
Yeah.
So I just lied and lied and lied and lied and lied. And then, I mean, it got so bad that, you know, like I remember, actually my book is the first chapter of my book starts off at about my worst in my using was my son's first birthday. And I remember sitting on the toilet and I'm shaking like uncontrollably. And I've got a needle in my left arm and I'm looking down at this needle and I'm just about to push another huge hit of methamphetamines into my arm. And I just remember thinking, fuck, what if I die here? You know, what if this is it? What if this is, and almost like I assumed that's how I was going to die because I was just using all the time. And then I thought, you know, what if they find me and my son, it's his first birthday and, you know, his idol daddy, he has no idea what I'm like and, you know, and what I'm doing. Nobody does. And everyone outside, like the families all come over and they're outside the toilet door all having an amazing celebration and I'm in the toilet doing this, you know. And I just remember thinking, wow, you know, like this shame, guilt washed over me and just that being such a low point. And the amount I was having was the most I've ever had in my life. That I was about to push into my arm. And it was just like, what am I doing here? But it still wasn't enough for me to change, you know, like I shot that up and then went out there and I'll stop, you know, I'll stop after this.
Yeah.
And then I didn't, you know, like, I mean, even before he was born, my absolute, I was adamant, I'm going to stop before my son's born. You know, we're having a baby, I'm going to stop using because I don't want my son to have a junkie as a dad.
And that is
I had
something
my,
I've heard so many times before, like, you know, in my own relationship, like about to do this or about to have children, and now we're about to have the next one, and now we've actually got
yeah,
two, and still nothing's
yeah,
changing. And then we would have friends, and they would come over, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is happening. I'm gonna do it before this happens. Oh,
yeah,
now I'm gonna have a baby, but I'll stop drinking, I'll stop smoking before the baby's born." And like, it's years later now, and
yeah.
what are we still doing?
Or my next birthday, I'll stop and I'll stop on my birthday.
Yeah.
I'll stop when that wedding. No, I can't do it now because we've got a wedding coming up. Or I can't do it now. It's somebody's birthday. There's always an excuse. And I mean, and I remember having my last hit in my perception. It was my last hit of my life on when you know, just before we went to the hospital, I managed to get my pregnant girlfriend in the car to wait in the car in labour while I raced inside and had another shot. Like how retarded, you know, is that? But I remember taking everything, my pouch, my spoon, my little black bag with all of my stuff in it, got to the hospital and I dumped it in the bin of the hospital and I went, that's it, done. Had the birth, you know, amazing birth, you know, like became a father in that moment, left my partner at the hospital, went and visited a mate to, you know, just to say, hey, I'm a dad. And, you know, and he was a dealer. And he was like, he grabbed a big bag of white powder, put it in my hand and went, hey, man, congratulations. And without a thought or without even, you know, anything at all, I just took the bag and went, thanks, man. Like it was like I'd earned it in some fucked up way, you know. And I went straight to the chemist, got another fit pack, went home, shot up, and it just carried on, you know. And then and then I'm like, oh, well, I'll stop by the time he gets home. And oh no, look, I'll stop, and then his first birthday, I'll stop, and then it still didn't stop, you know. So I knew this thing had a hold of me, like it had a hold of me, and I hated it by that stage. I hated using, I hated myself for using, I hated the drug, I hated what it did to me, but I just couldn't stop it, and I didn't know how to stop. Yeah, and then it just kind of took over, and then I remember, blessed one of my best friends, Yankee Rick. We were living with him he was living with us at the time actually, and he came up to me one night and said, Dino, if you don't tell Bev tonight that you're using, I'm going to. Yeah. And I said, no, man. You know, I tried the whole, no, I'm fine. I'm not using as much as you think. I'm okay. I promise. No, I'll stop myself. And he was like, no. He said, I'm telling you, if you don't tell her tonight, I'm going to tell her. And I was like, you bastard, you know, how could you? How dare you? I mean, and to this day, this guy saved my life. You know, like that was the greatest act of friendship a man could ever do, you know, like somebody could ever have done for me. So I told my partner and broke her soul, you know, like I remember just looking into her blue eyes and seeing everything click for her and just watching her soul break through those eyes as she learned that our last 3 or 4 years was just a lie. And I remember like leaving the house and she said, look, you need to leave, you need to get out. And I left the house and I'm, you know, thinking I've just fucked our family and I've just lost my family who are meant to mean the most and they did, and my perception meant everything to me, but clearly I was having an affair with something else, you know. And I walked around crying that whole night. I just walked and cried and sobbed my heart out like I was devoed, you know, that was the end of my life. Thought about taking myself out, thought about suicide. And ironically, you know, I ended up on the steps of a church at dawn crying. I didn't even know it was a church, to be honest. I just had cried and walked so much. that it was, and it dark, and by the time it came light, I realized, oh shit, I'm in a church, you know, like, and I'd fucking been brought up religious and was like, I'll never fucking believe in anything anyone tells me again, and how ironic that I end up on the steps of a church. And then this, the minister turned up in the morning and saw me, and he said, come inside, have a cup of tea, man, and we just had a chat. And he was a beautiful man. He said, look, we can help you out as much as we can help you out. I can't give you money. And I told him, look, I was in debt to some heavy bikers and you know, like everything, and just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, probably for the first time in my life in front of anybody else, you know. And he ended up just saying, look, you got to be honest with people, mate. You got to go home and you got to talk to her if she wants to talk to you. You got to call these bikers. You got to tell them the truth. And I was like, the truth? Fuck, how can I ever do it? They're going to kill me. What are you talking about?
That. Yeah.
And even that, the concept of the truth. I had no idea. I'd lied so much. Yeah. In fact, I was going to call my book, it's called Shoot Up. I was going to call it Life of Lies, because I had no idea what was a lie and what was the truth anymore. Like my you know, next lie was only as good as the previous one, you know. So everything was a lie, and I was like this caged animal backed into a corner all the time. Yeah. So I mean, bless my partner's heart, she forgave me and you know, said, look, we need to get you some help, and you know, and she stuck with me. And so we went to a rehab center, tried to get some help, and then it didn't really work. Like, I felt like I wasn't ready, obviously, you know, but also the place, it didn't feel right. And anyway, some things happened there. So I ended up using again. We'd planned to just take off and go to New Zealand. And in the meantime, I'd met somebody who was dealing, and who, you know, like everyone I knew had it. So it was inevitable, I guess, you know. So I ended up using again, hitting it hard. And then the thing is, when you stop, so I stopped for about 3 months after I told her. And then when you start again, you don't start off gradually again. You know, you start off where you left off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hit it hard, and then just fucked everything up for us. Like, I mean, lost all of the money we were saving to go overseas, to go to New Zealand. I was blowing up my arm, lost my car, you know, beautiful car, all sorts of things. And without even a conscience, without even thinking anything of it, you know, I was stealing off my own partner, my own newborn child, and really, really low stuff that I knew wasn't me. And so all that did was add to the shame and the guilt and the, you know, like, and it was my choice. Look, I did it, you know.
Yeah.
So it became really, really nasty. And then we ended up going back to New Zealand, and I knew then that I wasn't going to do it in New Zealand. I knew I had to get away from it, and I didn't know anyone there who had it. So when I left here, I left Perth, and again, I remember having my last shot, and this time it was, you know, it was yellow, it was horrible. And I remember giving it back to them, and in that moment, I knew that I was never going to use again. I knew that it had no hold on me whatsoever, because I gave it back. I didn't even want to taste it, smell it. I had zero attraction toward it. I mean, and that was a result of when I went back. I mean, I was dreaming and waking up screaming and crying, you know, for 3 years, like you know, going cold turkey. Like I dreamt that I'd used again, and I was so ashamed and so disappointed with myself. I'd wake up crying, and my partner would wake up, what's up? And I just dreamed that it shot up again, and that lasted for so long. And it was the memory of those dreams and the reality of those dreams that actually stopped me from ever using it again. You know? Mm-hmm. But I mean, I just swapped one thing for another. So that's called transference. I wasn't using drugs anymore, but then I just became an alcoholic. So I swapped the drugs for the alcohol. I was drinking every day, became an alcoholic, and colluded with my partner to be, you know, to get into it with me, because it made it easier for me. So I'd buy her UDL cans, and, you know, and then so she started to drink with me, and we had 2 young children, had another baby by the stage in New Zealand. And then, you know, like, I just became this asshole. I was a happy drunk, you know, but I mean, I wanted to stay at parties and go out all night, and, you know, like, and she was like, come on, we're going to get the kids to bed. And I'd be like, oh, you're just a killjoy. Fuck, you know, we're just having a good time coming out. And I started to put all of that on her, you know, which was fucked up. And even on the way home, you know, we're going home, and it's late, and the kids are tired, and I'm wanting to go and get more alcohol. Come on, stop at the bottle shop. And she said, I think you've had enough. Don't tell me I've had enough, you know, like, in all of that, you know. So it's a very selfish thing, you know, addiction. Like, couldn't even fathom or couldn't even think what she was going through or consider what she was going through.
Hi again.
I don't know if that's my connection or your connection, but it come up and said poor connection, and then eventually it dropped out. So.
I would normally say Bali, but actually mine looked like it was strong the whole way through. So yeah 9 out of 10 times it's Bali.
Mine looked it, but I usually turn my Wi-Fi off for videos in case it goes funny. So I've just turned it on just in case it's that. But what I'll do is at the end of this video, I'll just save both the videos and put them back together so we can just repost the actual video.
Clever girl.
Yeah. So do you want to continue where you left off?
Yeah, I kind of remember. So I think I was talking about, where was I? About,
You
yeah, going, like being an asshole.
yeah.
Yeah, being an asshole, like going, like, no, like taking it out on them, going home from parties and wanting to get more alcohol and not wanting to stop and change. Oh, and then I got into the, yeah, okay, so swapping my stuff for better quality addictions. So even though, like, I mean, I was going to the gym 6 or 7 days a week, you know, like I had the best body, I was ripped, you know, I never felt like it inside, you know, like I still had an addiction. I just had now a gym addiction. So even though you would think it's a better quality addiction, and we think that, you know, like because work and money and yoga and exercise are good quality addictions, but I still never felt right inside. So no matter how fucking muscly and ripped and, you know, beautiful my body was, inside I still felt broken. Inside I still felt like this unlovable little child, you know. So yeah, I was still using the gym, and I still it affected my relationships because I was at the gym all the time. You know, like that became more important than staying home and helping out with the kids or going straight home after work. I'd always go to the gym first. Yeah, so it was still an addiction. So I realized I still had this thing inside of me that was there was a void, a missingness inside ever since I was a child. And then I experienced this work with this guy, actually in Australia, MJB seminars, amazing guy, amazing workshop that changed my life. And it showed me for the very first time in my life that I've been chasing, what I've been trying to chase my whole life to fill was an illusion, because the truth is nothing was ever missing except in my mind. So my dad wasn't making me wrong. My dad wasn't telling me I was weak. My dad wasn't telling me that he didn't love me. I created all of that, and then the more I created, the more I needed to create, because you know, when you take a stance, you become a victim of circumstance, and then you've got to give foundation and confirm that stance, and prove it. So I started to prove to everyone and to the world that I was unlovable. And all I was doing was looking for that love of my dad, you know, looking for something that I thought was missing, and it was just an illusion. Yeah. So this workshop changed my life. I remember it was almost like somebody opened my eyes to life for the first time, and I got to see everything, and I was like, what? You know, like I had it all wrong. And I remember laughing and crying simultaneously. And I was laughing because it was so stupid. I mean, it was so dumb. You know, what? How could I not have seen that? You know, and then I was crying because I'd made so much of my life about this. You know, I became this junkie, this alcoholic, this shit father, horrible partner, and all because of this one story that was a lie. So I knew I needed to do more. I needed to find out about this. So I just hung around these guys like, you know, like a fly on a bagel. I set up to, you know, workshop rooms for them. I made tea and coffee for them. I hung around them. I did every workshop they ever did. And then I ended up, you know, becoming really good because I'd done all of their workshops. So yeah, I became really good at what they did, and then I started to do it myself, and this is what I do now. So I now I specialize in addictions, but work more holistically with people, you know. Don't focus on the drug, the alcohol. What's happening?
Your connection froze up again.
Oh no.
It's
Was it like
okay
that?
now, but you're a bit blurry.
Okay. Yeah, so pretty much that's my story. So now what I do is I work with people. I have a couple of programs, online programs and stuff that I'll talk to you about that at the end. But yeah, let's hear your story.
My story. So mine's been
Yeah.
a little bit different from yours. I was like that girl in the relationship on the other side of that.
Mm.
But my story really started from like a very young age. So by the time I was born, my mum was already an alcoholic. Her and my dad weren't together. Dad was only 19, so he smoked, you know, plenty of weed and did 19-year-old stuff. But it wasn't so bad. My mum was like a full-blown alcoholic, so I wasn't that healthy. I didn't have a very good placenta to grow up in when I was in the stomach.
Mm.
So I was born early, underweight, all that good stuff. When they took me home, she had a horrible partner at the time, I suppose you could say. So by the time I was 6 months old, my grandparents with my dad got full custody of me. But well, it was really because of like some incidents that happened. So my grandparents have always been amazing. They've always told me personally, like I haven't had that you can't do this sort of story. They've always been like, you can do whatever you want to do. You can work towards whatever you want to do. You can like have whatever you want in your life. You just have to work towards it. So I never had that like, oh, you won't amount to anything, or you can't do this, you can't do that sort of story. But my grandparents, like even though they sort of knew things were bad between them, obviously they're very supportive, loving people. So they said like, if you ever need anything at all, if anything's going on and you need help, you can call us at any time. And one
Mm.
night, in the middle of the night, they got a call. Like my grandpa got a call from my mum, and she was like, "I can't do it. Like I just need help." And he went to the house with the police. My mum and my 4-year-old sister were cowering in the corner. I was really, really badly hurt, and I didn't really know this full story until years and years later. But I knew from that point, like, that I went to the hospital. I had a broken leg. I had previous ribs, ankles, and wrist breaks that hadn't been helped. I knew that I'd probably been thrown around like a rag doll, but I didn't really know much else beyond that, and that they found needles and stuff around the house. The guy got arrested, got out, John from the car at the hospital, and stuff like that.
Wow.
But it wasn't until, like, I was always grateful because, like, I was gone by the time I was 6 months old. I had an older sister who didn't leave that environment until she was 14. I had a younger sister who still was there until she was 2, but at least she got away. But
Yeah.
the really heartbreaking thing about that scenario for me was when I, like, met with my sister. Like, I grew up knowing I didn't have a mum, not quite understanding why she didn't want me. Like, Dad always said, you know, of course you can contact her if you want to contact her. He didn't really talk much about her, but he said, like, of course you can talk to her if you want to talk to her. But she never really wanted to talk to me. Like, she didn't try and reach out to me. She didn't have any interest. Like, it was just these other people. So I think when I was about 5, I went to see them once because I kept asking about it. And then, like, I basically didn't after that. Like, I met with her once when I was 14, and it was very backwards. But I had met with my sister. She lives up in Broken Hill, so I went up to Broken Hill for something for work, and, like, we actually got to meet, and it was amazing, and I love her, and it was so heartbreaking because she's older than me. When all of this was happening to me, like, obviously she didn't have the best life and upbringing because she stayed in this environment, but, like, my son is 4 years old. He's cute, he's smart, he's naughty, he's intelligent. Like, he remembers things that people told him a year ago, and he'll just come out with it. And my sister was his age, like, in the corner watching this happen. So when I met with her, she just totally broke down. She was telling me, like, exactly what she saw, and, like, she had me by the feet, like, throwing me around the room, like as if she had a toy, and because I wouldn't stop crying, and obviously that was stressful.
Wow.
For her, you know, as we know, when you're a drug addict, it's not quite so easy to handle your stress levels. So, you know, my
Yeah.
mum had already been beaten and pushed into the corner. I'm not quite sure about my sister, but she obviously had a lot of traumatic experience in just seeing this stuff happen and not being able to do anything. So, like, I was very, very lucky that my mum was like, I need help. Like, somebody needs to do something. And they rang my grandpa, who went there, and this, like, I got to leave, you know. Which I'm so grateful for. And the most heartbreaking thing for me in that whole scenario is knowing what she saw and knowing what she continued to go through until she left, and how
Yeah.
that's affected her life. Like, it's nobody deserves that, like, especially from your parents, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So I moved. Obviously, I lived with my grandparents and my dad for a while, and then, you know, Dad and I had our own house. But again, you know, young guy, not really experienced as a parent. We have an amazing relationship, but I definitely didn't not grow up around addiction. Like, he smoked weed for ages. All his friends smoked weed. Of course, they drink. Like, this is young guys, what young guys do. It was a way to provide in some ways as well. So, so with that, like, I really saw the moments where my dad was changing. Like, I know he's like this kind, loving, like, beautiful person, would do anything for me. But I also got to see the, like, flip, like, rage, like, drag me down the hair by my, like, I would slam the door, or like, I'd answer back and I'd get dragged down the hallway by my hair, or clipped around the ear, thrown into my room, like, and, like, you know, people did more of that stuff 20 years ago when it was
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
Like, the smacking and stuff wasn't that bad. But for me, it was like watching the flip of the switch, and it's like full on rage. And I really saw, like, I saw the trends in this happening. Like, you know, he might have been smoking more or less, or he might have quit for a while, or, you know, he might run out. That's the worst part.
God
He
forbid.
might run
Yeah.
out, and then you see those, like, those characteristics and those things start to kick back in, and, like, it's not always controllable. So I remember having conversations with my grandparents, like, when things were bad, and, like, and you're like, is he going to be okay? Is he going to have schizophrenia? Like, this is intense. Like, and I could feel it. So I grew up knowing about all of this. So, I mean, I've tried cigarettes and I've tried weed and I've tried alcohol and other stuff, but like I never had a fascination in doing it because I went with all of this like, oh yeah, let's give it a go, but like I only to experience why they were like this and like why is it such a like a catchy thing, you know? And like, I was totally indifferent for me, but with all of those things, I'd grown up in this scenario. So for me, I was like, well, I don't want that in my life. I don't like I know that I don't want that. Like if this is what that means, then I don't want that in my life. And as I got older, because I had that both sides, like I had the loving, supporting, you can do anything side, which I always had that sort of spirit at the same time. As I got older, this sort of got worse because as I got older, I wasn't so much okay with just being thrown against the wall or like dragged by my hair. So I'd start to fight back. And that would turn into much more escalated arguments, much more intense, like being held up against the wall by my neck and things like that. And I mean, my dad and I have an amazing relationship today. Like in many ways, we grew up together. And by that time he was maybe 30, mid-30s, he made the decision to stop. Like he was always strong in his own way. So once he decided, I don't want to do this anymore, like this isn't for me, that was it. Like he was able to do that. And like he's got 8 children now between him and his partner. And I'm so grateful that I was the first one and I went through this experience because like even with the next sibling down, like over the years, I've just seen, like I always remember like being, say, 16 and having my little brother, and I used to think, my dad was never that patient with me. Like he never treated me like that. He would never have done those things or like put up with that behavior with me. So, you know, 8 kids later, he's like this super patient, like calm, understanding dad. So it's really good. He's learnt from the experience. He's learnt about himself. He's let go of that part. So the rage factor doesn't really come into it anymore. But because I had that hope and I could see that people can come out of the other side of this, like people can come good, people can make that choice, people can do this.
Yeah.
When I started to, you know, see guys fall in love and I met somebody who like made me just like it was uncontrollable. Like the energy was amazing, like it had to happen, but all the red flags were there. Like if you think about it in theory, no, it was never going to be a good idea, but you have that feeling, and like at a young age, you can just totally ignore the red flags. It's like, they say it'll be fine. That won't happen forever. Like this won't affect us forever. And I was hearing these things like from even in the beginning, like, oh, as soon as I have you, I won't need to do this. Oh, as soon as I have this, I won't need to do that. As soon as we do this, I won't need to keep doing that. And, you know, at first I was only like 16, 17. So, and I had that experience with my dad where he did come out of it. So I was like, okay, I believe him. And that went on for years and years and years. And it went from just weed to alcohol as well, to other stuff, back and forth. And weed and alcohol are not a good mix, especially in this scenario. It would be like if you had weed, you could have that calm bit and the rage would go off eventually, like, or if you're running out, it was terrible. But then if you have alcohol, sure, it's like fun for the moment, but then there's the nastiness and the aggression that comes out. But then, you know, on the other side of that, if you have alcohol but have run out of weed, like that is never a scenario I want to be in again. Like
it's not a good one.
Don't want to be around that. Like it is intense, it's uncontrollable, and it's horrible. And I knew that I didn't want that in my life. I tried for years and years. Like this person spent all this time telling me that this wasn't always going to be a problem. Like that this wouldn't do this. Like, you know, some weeks we'd have $50 for food because all the other money had been spent on other stuff. I was always trying to come up with different ways, come up with, you know, ways to pay the bills, ways to do this, but all the other money like just kept disappearing. Like there was no recognition that bills money needs to pay the bills or the food money is actually to feed our children. It was like, I need this, so I'm getting this, and you can work the rest out. And that's how it was. And in a lot of different ways, there's so many different facets to it. But I got to, like, I got to different points at different times where I'm like, I know I can't do this, but I didn't really know how to let go. Like, this is somebody that I love. This is somebody that I had children with. Like, I didn't want to do that. So it was tough. And like not knowing and having mixed advice, like people haven't, not everybody has been through this. So people will be like, oh, be patient. Oh, weed's not that bad. Or alcohol's not that bad. But you don't live with it. You don't deal with the everyday of this. Like, you're not worrying about how you're going to buy food or pay for stuff, or like, you know. For me, once you have children, the responsibility needs to change. Okay. And yes, like, look after ourselves first so that we can look after our children and be the best versions of ourselves. But I would never do anything at the expense of their well-being. And that's what I was seeing as a common occurrence, and that really broke me. So by the time we were like 8 or 9 years into this, I was like, I can't do it anymore. Like, I was broken. I didn't feel like I could speak. I didn't feel like I could say what I wanted, express anything. I didn't feel like me at all. I just felt like broken and depressed, really. Like, I started to pull away from people. I pulled away from business. Like, this was the only person left in my life, because I still had my family, but I pulled away from most other things for this person.
Yeah.
So, and that just worsens it, because it's like,
which is a dynamic that they create as a result of that as well. This is the thing that the addict wants, you know. So you stop having family, you stop having friends, you stop having people who will advise you against the way that I'm controlling you, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's none of it's intentional, so it's
No.
It's not a fault. It just sucks.
Yeah, fuck, big time, big time.
And like, by that stage, 8 or 9 years in, I got to the point where I couldn't handle it anymore. I knew that. I actually went to a personal development event in Bali, and it was one of the best things that I've ever done. Like, I learned a lot about awareness, and that, it helped me in a lot of ways, and it still helps me to today. Like, having the awareness that because somebody's acting like this, it doesn't necessarily mean anything to do with me. Like, they can be going crazy and it's actually nothing to do with me. And that really helped in some ways, because at some point I was like, this person says they love me, like, they won't let me go, but like, why do they hate me so much? Like, why can't you just act like you like me? Like, what's going on? And I just couldn't get through. We tried all these different things, like compromising with it, like working out different ways to include it, but not include it too much, or have budgets, or have this and that, and nothing worked. So got to that point, I gained the awareness, and I sort of came back from that event knowing that it wasn't anything really to do with me, but I was flicking that switch. And I could see it. Like, I had communicated this, like, this is how I see it. Every time you choose to do this at the expense of family, at the expense of us, like, I'm at this point where you're really making a choice every time now. You're making that choice that it's that or us, and you are making that choice every day, continually. And as soon as he would come home, as soon as this would happen, as soon as he'd gone and bought more drinks from money that we didn't have on the way home, because he had to buy them on the way home, I just, that switch had flicked inside of me, and I'm like, okay, like, you're at this distance, you can stay at this distance. But because I knew I couldn't handle it any longer, things became toxic, because I couldn't handle what was going on. I couldn't handle it continuing to happen. I knew that I needed to get away from it. But he couldn't handle me not handling it. And that caused a lot of tension. So I ended up taking the kids and moving out. We had some time apart. Like, we struggled with being able to just let go. Like, so we both knew that we loved each other. We both knew, like, these people that were inside of us, but they were gone. Like, they were gone. They weren't able to come out because of all these different reasons and this whole history and experience. And I had gotten to the point where I just didn't want this in my life. I was no longer happy to accept this in my life. I just didn't know, like, I wasn't ready to let go of the person, but I knew I didn't want this. And we had that next couple of years of, oh, I won't do this, I won't do that, like, you know, trying more compromising until it really blew up. And more things continued from there. More situations happened, more promises were broken. Like, we did all sorts of things on these promises of this life, like you moving to New Zealand. Similar to that, like, we had this chance for a fresh start. I was told, this is what I'm going to do with my fresh start. This is how it's going to be. We can create this life that we've always wanted and we've always dreamed of, and we can do this. So I had that fear of like, what if it doesn't work out? But I'm like, okay, like, this is it. Like, trust you, let's go with this. Like, let's do it. Like, let's have this family that we've always wanted. And then, yeah, all the stuff.
Living under the illusion of broken promises, yeah?
All the stuff.
So living under the illusion that they're always going to change, that something's going to be different, so it's always living under that illusion that, you know, like, it's not how life is, but they'll change. I know they can be better. I know it's not who they are. Yeah.
So yeah, it left to some really tough times, and then like I got to, and even once I moved away from that a second time, we still weren't ready to just not do it. And then another personal development event came up, and I just realized how I could connect with me. Like, and I knew things that I wanted. I knew things that I wanted to do in my life, but I just totally realized exactly how I can connect with me, be who I am. And I was in a space where I was away from that. So I had no stress in my life. I could pay the bills, and I could, you know, I could buy food, and we could do things. Like, it doesn't matter to me if I've got no money, as long as my kids like have clothes and food and bills. Like, I don't care if I don't have any money. And that's not a stressful life for me. Like, that's like my, like, I've got nobody who's taking that little bit of money that we have and spending it on other stuff, and I'm having to constantly worry, like, how am I going to feed the kids? How am I going to put petrol in the car to take them to school?
Yeah.
And that is horrible. So that was removed. I'd already moved away from that, so that was all settled. But then I went through this stage where I knew that in some ways I was afraid of this person. Even if they weren't so bad now as they were years ago, I was still like scared and afraid because of like, what are they going to say? What are they going to think? Is this going to make them blow up? Like, is this going to turn into something? So I didn't have the ability to be myself in that relationship, honestly. Like, and that's a really blunt way to put it, but I just couldn't. It just wasn't going to happen. And I went to this event. I was able to fully just reclaim myself, connect with what I want, who I am, my values, and go, well, like, I already know all my values. I know what I feel is good and what I feel is bad and what I do and I don't want in my life. And it's just time to make that happen.
Yeah. And not an easy decision when you have kids involved, yeah? And somebody that you love.
And it's hard because it's like, it's easy to go, oh, just step away from that. But like, it's somebody you love, somebody you have children with, somebody you're connected with. Like, you want, and even now, like, I still help support this person. Like, we've been talking on the phone and we're friends. Like, it's good. But like, obviously you don't want to hurt this person. You don't want them to end up worse. You want to be supportive without like making the situation worse or like enabling it.
Enabling them, yeah. And that's one of the one of the programs I have is that I created a program for people who are affected by addiction, who are looking after people with addictions, like parents and siblings and partners, and you know, because they tend to, what they do out of love tends to enable the person or push them further into the addiction without them realizing. And I wanted to show them how not to do that, you know, like to do what you're doing, to start to set boundaries, to focus on themselves, you know, not to give this person so much power, you know.
So can you share maybe a couple of quick things, like when you decided like that was your point, that you were finished with this addiction, like what was it that made you go, this is it, and actually stick to it? And like with other people, like for advice that we can give them, like you know, in letting them know that there is support. Like, I mean, the course is about this too, but like there is support for people. Like, there is people that can reach out. There are steps that they can take. So what might some of those be?
So, okay, first point, like the change for me came, you know, like I said, I'd stopped the addictions, you know, like, I became a gym junkie and then personal development junkie, and I still, although, you know, like they were better quality addictions, I was still an addict and I still had that turmoil going on inside. So before I did this workshop that kind of changed everything for me, I had my son, my 9-year-old son, by the throat up against the wall, wanting to punch him in the face. And I just remember in my mind going, what the fuck, you know, what are you doing? You know, like I'd spent my whole life saying, I will never be like my dad. I will never be like my dad. And I know, and I meant it. I would, you know, like it was my conviction to never, ever be like my dad. And in that moment, I realized I'd become my dad. You know, I'm like, 9-year-old boy by the throat against the wall. What the fuck is that? You know? And I just went, Dino, you got to, this is it. You got to do something about it. And I realized I had so much rage, so much anger inside. Look, I was angry because I didn't know I was angry. I mean, I was just operating without even any consciousness, any awareness. So I knew I needed help, and I knew it needed to be outside of what I knew. Because if I had spent my whole life saying I'll never be like my dad, and that didn't work, well, then I needed to get somebody smarter than me. So yeah, look, I went into some different programs like personal development works, and this seminar that I did, MJB's, changed my life. And then I also went and worked at I did some training and then worked at a rehab center, and realized that I was really good there, you know, because I've had this experience, you know, that I mean, I did the program as a client first, even though I'd given up drugs and I wasn't drinking anymore. And I hadn't done for a couple of years. I knew I'd been through it for a reason. So I went into this course at the rehab center, and I loved it because it gave me an understanding of how I got to where I got to. You know, like I really got to see. Fuck, no wonder I became an addict. You know, no wonder I became a junkie and an alcoholic. So I kind of started to put the pieces together. And then I also got to do work around my anger. You know, did some anger courses, and I did some, you know, like suicide prevention courses, and I got to work with people, facilitating skills, and I was really, really good because of my experience. So, and I remember sitting in the training, you know, the first time, and there were all these psychs and people with degrees, and feeling like really out of place. I'm just I'm a junkie. What are you talking about? You know, what am I doing here? And saying that, like, I feel so out of place. Like, you guys have got double degrees, you've been to university, and they just said, Dino, you've got something that we could never ever have. You know, like, and then I started to realize the value of my experience, and so I realized that I could actually really relate to people on that level, you know, whether they were addicts themselves or whether they've been affected by it, because I know how much it affected my kids and my partner, and I know what I did to them, and I was able to, you know, like, to talk to them about it, and really reflect and get their side and their perspective, and also write letters, and, you know, like, and also apologize, and, you know, like, although I don't think there's any way to apologize for that and for the damage that can be done, you know.
Congratulations.
But able to, sorry?
I just said congratulations, Greg. Sorry to interrupt you, but he's
no, that's okay.
In the comments that he's 22 months clean.
Oh, well done. Awesome, Greg. Yeah. And that's it, guys. It's you know, look, there's so much help out there. There's like rehab centers, there's, you know, there's addictions, and there's people who are in these centers. Like, it's, you know, sometimes we think, oh, you know, the shame and guilt of having to go to a place like that. The people who are working there are people who have been through it 9 out of 10 times, you know. So you know, like, they know what they're talking about. They know what they're doing. They're there because they want to help, and they're there because they know how to help. So, I mean, there's always somebody to talk to.
Yeah. So, obviously, we're going to introduce your course in a minute, which is an incredible avenue. And I mean, I think that's great as well. Like, if you are too scared to reach out to a rehab center, or like somewhere you have to be face to face, this is an incredible opportunity to do something in your own comfort space, like, and at your own pace and things like that. But like, so what would you say if somebody was like, okay, I'm an addict, I have something that I need to give up because this and that, and they're ready to take that step? What should they do?
That's the thing, is actually knowing that you're ready. So I was like ready in my mind many, many times, and I actually wasn't really ready. So when you know, I mean, I would say definitely talk to somebody. Like, if, you know, first of all, the first thing is to admit that you have a problem. And in my mind, I mean, for years, even when I was a full-blown junkie and I was putting stuff in my arm and I couldn't do without it, in my mind, oh no, I'm okay, I can stop anytime. You know, I would never ever refer to myself as an addict. I'm not a junkie, I'm not an addict, I can stop anytime. But the truth is that there's no way I could have stopped. So definitely, I would say, talk to somebody. Pick up the phone and talk to. I mean, they can ring me. Like, I have, you know, like, I have 15-minute free sessions on my site just to be able to talk to somebody. You know, and that's the key, I think, is there's so many people who are so stuck and so lost and carry so much shame and guilt, and that we don't want people to find out about. And, you know, like, God, the amount of suicides. You know, I think it was over 4,000 suicides in Australia last year, and 80% of them were male, because males don't talk. You know, we don't talk to people. And this is why now I run men's circles. I run men's circles here. I've done them in Australia, just to get guys to open up and start talking. But, you know, like, anybody, talk to somebody, but make sure it's somebody who knows what they're talking about. Don't just go and talk to, you know, Uncle Bob or somebody who's going to go, oh no, you're another, your other, you know, friends who are using or who are drinking, and no, you're not so bad. I'll just cut down a little bit, you'll be fine. Talk to somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah. And what would you say if somebody's still in the mix of it, they know, like, they can recognize the signs, like, I know this isn't right, I know this is affecting me, I know this is affecting my family, but I don't know if I'm ready to stop, or I don't know if I can.
Yeah. So I would say like the biggest thing for me was when I started to get serious with myself. I started to realize, like instead of, the good thing is that, the dangerous thing is our mind is so amazing that we can bullshit ourselves and we can lie to ourselves. We can justify anything we want,
Yeah.
So to start to get real and actually, how is this affecting my life? So the pros and the cons, what's it really given me? And in the end, it was like when I realized, fuck, what's this given me compared to what it's taken away from me? It was robbing, and it was seriously sucking my soul. It was robbing me of my soul. And deep down, I knew it wasn't who I was. Deep down, I knew I was a good guy. I knew I'm a beautiful man who's compassionate, who cares about other people, who loves people, who wants, who loves to be in service, who loves to give, who's generous, and compassionate and all of that. But none of that was coming out. I was the opposite. I was hurting people. I was messing people. I was fucking them over. I was like I was giving them the worst of me, and the people that I loved the most were getting the worst of me.
Yeah.
So yeah, get real is what I would say. So definitely talk to somebody, but get real with yourself, and then like start to listen to what people around you might be saying, and ask yourself, is what they're saying true? Yeah. Instead of nah, you're just nagging me. You don't know what you're talking about. You're not.
Yeah. And I think often if you hear the same thing coming up again and again, or specifically if you hear the same thing from more than one person,
yeah,
it's a good
especially
indication that maybe you should take a little moment and just
yeah.
feel that.
Yeah, reflect into if it feels right for you. I've learned no matter what anybody says about me, like there's got to be an element of truth in it, or they wouldn't be saying, or the universe wouldn't have brought it into my field, So I don't necessarily buy into it. Yeah, absolutely. I don't necessarily buy everything they're saying, and I used to do that. Oh my God, they're so right. I need to do that. And then I realized, hang on, they've also got their own stuff, and it's been filtered through their perception. So, but I know if they're saying something to me, there's an element of truth in it for me. So find that element of truth, and find that element of where can I take responsibility for what they're saying, and leave theirs with them.
I would add to that as well that in every opportunity and every moment, we have the ability to make choices. We have the opportunity to do better, to be more, and we can connect to what we want and what's right for us, and we can make decisions. We can make choices, no matter how big or small. Even if it's a baby step, it's still a step. And in every moment, we have the opportunity to do this. So, lastly, can you share maybe a few quick tips that, like, if somebody is on the other side, if they're dealing with someone with an addiction, if they're supporting someone, like, I know your course goes through this and it's going to help a lot of people, like, in a very in-depth way, like in the situation that I was in or your wife was in. But what are some quick couple of things that we can let people know now that, what's helping and what's haunting?
Yeah, oh, I like that. What's helping and what's haunting. So first and foremost is, I think, take the attention off them. So the thing with addiction is it becomes such a power thing, and then they have all the power, they have the whole, and not, like you said, it's not a conscious thing, but everything becomes about them. So everyone walks around on eggshells and tiptoes around and make sure they're okay, and we don't want to upset them, and we don't want to push them further into it. Fuck that, stop that, So first of all, stop buying into that, stop giving them the power. So focus on yourself and do exactly what you did, Jenaya, okay, I don't want this in my life anymore. So you have to start to set boundaries, and don't set boundaries around them and around the kids and around your other family, which is what we tend to do, is start to set boundaries around everywhere in our life. And it takes so much work and copious amounts of energy. Set boundaries around yourself,
And that's really where it came to with me, is I got to the point where I knew that it just wasn't okay. Like, I knew this wasn't okay with me, but I was like, it doesn't matter about all the rest. I can't do this. Like, this isn't okay with me. It's not right. And I had to move from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Bam, and then just hold it right there, and then you have to be firm with that, and then there has to be a consequence if that boundary gets broken, because the only way we learn as human beings is through consequences. So what we tend to do is always take away the consequence for these people, and we make it easy for them, like we enable them without even realizing, we think we're trying to protect them, we're trying to, I know they're going to be better, I know it's not really them, or kids, be quiet, your dad's in a bad mood, or your dad's not feeling the best today, and making excuses, which is bollocks. My mum used to do that with Dad when he was, he was an alcoholic and violent, and we're just creating that environment for them, to continue doing what they're doing. And the truth is, you're not doing them a service by doing that.
Yeah.
So stop, set some boundaries, around your life. Stop enabling them. Stop giving them permission to do what they do. Stop giving them permission to not serve you in the way that you want to be served, to not meeting your needs in the way that you want your needs to be met. You know, so work out. I would write down what's really important to you, what's a no-brainer, you know, what's not negotiable.
Yeah.
And then let them know this is a non-negotiable for me, but you have to have a backup plan and you have to be willing to follow through.
I think that's a really key point, is let them know. Like, don't just decide this.
Oh, no,
Don't go,
yeah.
I can't handle this, and then not give them a shot. Like,
Yeah.
if it's not
Yeah.
someone you actually care about and you don't want the person in your life, but there's all this tangled things, then sure, like, move away. But if it's someone you deeply care about and it's someone you're connected to in some way, communicate.
Yeah.
Like, give them the opportunity and
To
just
change.
have that firm, heartfelt, like, I love you, but I can't do this conversation.
Yeah.
And very clear from the right space, not from an I'm right and I'm going to argue with you.
No, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I love you, this is where I'm at,
Yeah.
this is what I need, and either we can work on this together or we're not going to. Basically.
Yeah, but either way, you have to and choose that. But like, you're right, it's doing it from that loving space. Unless the only thing I'd say about that is if you're in danger, get yourself out of danger. Like if you or your kids are in danger, then the first and foremost thing is to get yourselves out of danger. And then, but in the best possible way as well. Like you don't, like I wouldn't say just suddenly call the cops and because that can create, I remember like people, when we were young, people, you know, the neighbors would always call social security back then, you know, and they would come to the door, you know, like, and then that made it worse because these guys were threatening to take us away from our family, you know, we need to rescue the kids and we need to protect the kids. And then I'm like, fuck, I don't want to be, my dad's violent and angry and abusive, but he's still my dad and it's still my family. I don't want to be dragged away from my family.
It doesn't matter what your parents like, you never want to be taken away.
It's normal, yeah. What you're growing up with is normal, but I mean, you still keep them safe, you know, but then create avenues where you get to have this communication. So first of all, get yourself to a safe space and then open up the dialogue for this is not okay with me, you know, like I'm not going to be doing this anymore. So either you change or this changes.
Yeah, and like you said, in sticking to that, because there's so many situations where people will go, I can't do this anymore. You know, you move away from, you know, you have some breathing space, and then you come back and it's like, I'm sorry, and you're sorry, and like, we're all sorry, we're going to do it all again.
Yeah, so don't live on the false promise. So like I wrote down before, like you said something about that illusion. So don't live under the illusion of the premise of change. You know, and then same with when we leave the relationship, often what we're grieving isn't the actual relationship. We're grieving the ideal of what the relationship could have been. Yeah. You know, is that picture that we had, oh, they were going to change, or, you know, they could have been so different, and when they're such a beautiful person, and they are, everybody's a beautiful person. You know, they're not their actions, they're not their behavior, but you can't be responsible.
For some time, that was a big fear for me too. It's like, I knew this person was a good person within. I could see all of this stuff within, like, and you know, we'd had glimpses of it, and we had children together, and we loved each other, and the feelings were there. So and the other part of, like, you know, not wanting to lose them, you know, the kids, all the other feelings and all of that sort of stuff. The other part was like, well, what if I do this and they end up like this exact person that we've been trying to be this whole time? So you give them that chances to do it.
Yeah, because they're so close, they might change.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting in actually making this move. Like, it hasn't been that long, so I'm not going to say this person has changed and this person has recovered, because, you know, you get to that point where, like, you can do it for a month, you might be able to do it for 3 months or 6 months, and then it's like, oh, actually, I just have a little bit, like, it'll be okay. Yeah. And that's, like, I see that cycle come up. I will say that right now this person is in a much better space, but that doesn't make me feel like, oh, I wish I had have had them in this space. It makes me feel like I'm so happy and proud and glad that you're feeling this way now. Yeah. And, like, please, it keeps coming up, or maybe it's just life. But Dean has a couple of different things. So he has a program online to support people who are caring for those with addiction, to help you really understand the helping and the haunting, not to use those words, and really work through that from a place of love and kindness. And he's also got one on addiction to help you if you are the person that's actually struggling and you're ready to make that move.
Yeah. So the addiction program itself is a 16-week program. So it's a really in-depth program. And like I said before, we don't focus on the drug, the alcohol, whether it's sugar, food, sex, porn. We don't focus on that. We focus on what's underneath that. So what led me to this, how I'm, you know, like, and then what to do about it. You know, how do I increase my level of self-esteem? How do I set boundaries? How do I take responsibility in all these different areas of my life? How do I let go of the shame, the guilt, you know, like, and what to do with the depression? So it's more like a life skills program, but it actually addresses the addiction from underneath, not from what we think it is, the surface level. Yeah, and the other program is for people, to learn what not to do that will, keep enabling people. So just some simple things, about bringing the focus back to you, how to set boundaries.
And that was a
similar
12-week,
thing.
was it?
That's a 12-week online program. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the quantum shift is, sorry.
No, you go.
Yeah. So the quantum shift is like probably one of the most amazing things I get to do with people. It's like 20 years of therapy in one session. And it helps. Everybody has a subconscious story. Like my story was, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy of love, I'm not strong, I'm not important. And we all have a similar core story, but we have all these specific things that are missing, like all these little sub-stories that come off that. So the quantum shift really, really gets to the core story and obliterates it in one session. So I'll actually post a little link with a video that explains all about the quantum shift in this after this call. Yeah.
So what I'll say here is we're two people from very different avenues who have been through some stuff. Like we've experienced both sides of this in different ways. So we are two people that are here to support you. So if you are feeling something and you feel like you need to reach out, you feel like you need to talk to someone, we're here. You can do it. We give you permission to open up, to us. It's not going to go anywhere. We're here to support you. Dean will post in the comments below on this live and the other one, the two online courses in case anybody would like to get involved with those, and also the quantum shift process so you can learn more about that. Because I think that's something not just with addiction, but the quantum shift is going to help with years and years of built up stuff that you don't even know is there in most cases, or how it's affecting you. So he'll post that link as well. What I'm going to do is I will save these videos and crop them together. So I'll upload another video later, which is the full version without the mix up in the middle, just so that you guys have it in one space, and we'll put the links in there as well.
Awesome. So can I just say as well, amazing, Jenaya, to be able to come and talk to somebody from both sides. It's such an amazing, and also shows, for me, the work that you've done and the growth that you've done. And, you said before about, you had your grandparents, telling you can do anything, you can be anything. And then I reflected as well, people who don't have that, no wonder people who go through the experience that you went through end up, becoming addicts themselves, or looking to the bottle, looking to the drug, and instead of going, I'm not having that in my life. So, I mean, what a blessing you are, darling.
Yeah, and even in that time with my dad, when things were bad, it was never, you can't do this. It was I'm blowing up because of something else.
Yeah.
So I was very lucky that I moved out of a terrible environment into one that wasn't really that great, but I still had both sides of the scale. I had the support and I had the messy side as well.
Yeah.
So I was really lucky in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, and it has been amazing to get to know you. I know we've had a few little chats and stuff now, but it's been amazing to get to know you and really connect. And I cannot wait to come to Bali and see you.
Same. Come to Bali. You'll love it.
Cool. All right. Well, have an amazing day, guys. I look forward to speaking to you all soon. And I really hope you got some great value and insight from this today.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Touch base soon. Yeah. Thanks.